Hi everyone, hello beautiful people, beautiful souls. I welcome you in my show Chat with Monica, and I also welcome my guest John V Denley. Hi John.
Hello.
So with John, actually we done one interview already where we were talking about slightly different topic. It was based on stress and depression. So very different topic actually to what we are going to be talking about today. So for those that want to watch it, it's definitely on my YouTube channel. But today, get excited because it's going to be about children up until age 7. So I want to see what you are going to share with us, but let's wait a minute. So we will be back.
Everybody wants to be happy. Everyone wants to be loved. All of us wish to be healthy. Everyone wants to enjoy life.
Art changes the world. It inspires people to stand up and speak up and support.
Hi everyone once more. So I welcome you in my show Chat with Monica, and once more, John, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem at all. Good to be here.
Brilliant. There's no more.
That's right. I actually have some of these to do fun things with.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Sending it right back at you. Hey, so John, I really want to know how you've been since we spoke last time, because it's been a while, I think a couple of years for sure. And as I said, the topic was slightly different. And today we are going to be talking about programming our brains up until age 7. So I wonder how you actually got to, what's your story, how you got to do what you are doing now.
Well, yes. Yeah, it has been a couple of years, hasn't it? Of course, we have this kind of lost 2020 in the middle, don't we? Everybody's kind of forgetting that there was a whole year in between there. Yeah, and we're talking about anxiety and depression and stress and so forth last time round, and we will touch on that a little bit later on because it's a factor of what we're going to be talking about today. Ultimately, depending on how you do it. My background is, well, I used to be an IT consultant. There you go. And then I quit that job to help a friend do a startup company in 2005. Then they sold the company, and then a friend of mine was setting up a children's indoor play center. So hence slightly relevant in that respect. And I helped to do that, and that didn't quite go to plan. And I ended up nearly £500,000, no, about £400,000, $500,000 in debt in 2007. And that led me kind of, what am I going to do with my life now? And I tried to do some IT stuff for a few years. And then in 2014, I was doing a course, and it's kind of an NLP course, neuro-linguistic programming course on how to be a better business owner. And during the course of that course, it became very apparent that I didn't really like IT that much, and I needed to do something else. And the guy who was running that, Terry Gormley, said to me, "So what do you love to do?" And I said, "Well, I love standing in front of a room full of people and educating them and entertaining them, which is what I've been doing in my IT career for many years anyway. But I wanted to focus on the journey that I'd had of mental struggles with depression and anxiety. I'd actually developed an anxiety or a phobia of talking to women who I was attracted to. And I'm not sure how much of you, I think I must have mentioned this to you at some point in the past. And that all started sort of in 2001. Well, it started a long time before that. But then I went on a course in 2009 to learn how all that happened, how that developed. And it was another sort of NLP course. And what happened there was really interesting and kind of leads on to where we're getting to now. Was we had a room full of men who were all struggling with how to talk to women. And they were all telling us stories about why we had these blockages and these beliefs about why we were rubbish. And it was just amazing to look around the room, to see like 20 odd, 30 odd men who all had completely different stories, all of which were nonsense, completely made up nonsense stories about why they weren't successful. And it was just so funny. And then the guy at the front of the room who was teaching us, obviously, was then talking about how we get programmed and how we get these beliefs and how they manifest in our lives. And it was just fascinating. And of course, I took that forward. So then when I had a massive anxiety or panic attack in 2012, and my doctor said to me, we're going to put you on antidepressants. And I think it was the third time I'd been on antidepressants at that point. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I then started looking at what else could I do to get myself off antidepressants, and get past that. And of course, it all came back down to what's going on inside your head. What are the words you're saying to yourself? What are the voices the stories that you tell yourself? So yeah, that was my story to come off that. And then when 2014 came along, and Terry said, what do you want to teach people? I said, I'd like to teach people my story and how I got to where I am today. And I'd like to help other people shortcut that learning experience, which took me probably the best part of 10 years to get to that point. And I'd like to be able to help people to figure that out really quickly. So yeah, so that's kind of my background story. It's a little bit longer than I planned to say there, but it's funny how all these things kind of tie up together. And actually, on another point as well, when I went to university, my first year at university was doing computer science and electrical engineering, and I hated the electrical engineering bit, so I dropped that. And obviously, the computer science ended up being an IT career. But in my first year, I did psychology. I had no idea why or how it would be useful in my later life. And I went to do it just because that's where all the pretty girls were. So that was a kind of an early manifestation of how do I get to talk to women. And of course, I sat there and listened to this psychology thing, and I thought, wow, this is amazing and fascinating. But of course, I never took it any further at that point. So
yeah, brilliant. And in that group, because you were saying that you were in the same room with like 20, 30 odd men that had same kind of a problem as you.
Yeah.
And that you actually tapped back into where it began, where it was programmed in the beginning. So what was the problem?
Well, for me, the problem was, for me, the problem was that I had undiagnosed mild autism. That's not, people with autism, people with it's a whole complicated thing about what you determine as being full autism or whatever. But I was having autistic tendencies, and it was causing me a few problems. I also, ADHD was the other part of it as well. And that was just causing me some problems in social situations. So I was struggling to understand social norms and understand when things are appropriate and when things are not appropriate and so forth. And of course, that then developed into a phobia, because I'd say inappropriate things and I'd get rejected for it. And then I'd think, oh, well, now I need to be scared about, and it just becomes a developing thing. And that can happen to a lot of people from an early age. And that's hence into where we come to now, which is where those phobias develop from. It's an experience thing that happens to us. And then once you've experienced it once, you then get worried about experiencing it again. And then the next time you have an opportunity where that might happen, and this could be like a fear of dogs or spiders or, all that kind of phobia type stuff, you get scared of it. And then because you're scared of it, you're already anxious and nervous. And then the thing then kind of happens, and then you kind of predicted it before it's happened. And then often it happens anyway because you've predicted it. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And of course, over time, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And if you don't know where those things come from originally, then it can be a really debilitating problem for a lot of people. So yeah. So for me, it was later on in life, but quite a lot of these things can happen before you're even aware of them. And I do wonder whether or not some of the things that happened to me as a child had an effect on me later on in life, but I have no idea, because it's really hard to go back and see kind of what happened when you were a child and how those things might have affected you, like how your parents spoke to each other, or how a friend treated another friend, or how the teachers spoke to each other at the class, or the teachers spoke to the other school children, and so forth. So all those things can have an effect on how your belief system is built up.
Yeah. So let's have a look at us people as children.
Yeah.
From the time that we are born until we are 7, because there is a lot of programming going on during that time, and 7 years is a long time. So how does our brain actually get programmed in 7 years?
Right. Yeah. And actually, this is another thing I've done a lot of research on is how this happens in early years, and it came about because I was asking a few people about their inner voice and saying, You know, that little inner voice inside your head that you chat about and all that stuff. And I had a couple of people saying, I haven't got one of those. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I started looking into that. And then I looked right back to when that starts. And so we have, as children, we're sort of born with this kind of beautiful, unblemished brain that has no beliefs, has no judgment, has no negativity in it. It doesn't worry about the color of your skin or your religious beliefs, or a child at that age, as sort of 0 to 3, has no knowledge of these things at all, no experiences, and all of those experiences come from their society. So the parents, obviously, they're 0 to 3, 0 to 4, well, before preschool age anyway. Of course, it's really just the parents and the family and extended family, and some of the societal things around you as well. And then, of course, you go into, so that's what they call the imprinting age, where you sort of start to imprint on that brain and get all those neurons firing and so forth. And then you have a stage between sort of 4 and 7, which is kind of what you were alluding to earlier, which is the modeling stage. And that's where you start to copy other people and look at what other people are doing and then start doing it yourself, because you have the ability, the motor skills to be able to start doing that sort of thing. And children, when they start playing, they'll look at other children who are playing and then copy them and see how other people are in the playground are playing, and then go, oh, that's how you're supposed to do things, and that's how things work, and that's how we interact as children, how your parents and how your teachers interact. And we start modeling all that and learning all that and going, this is how it all works. So obviously, if you're in a different country, those sort of age groups and the way things work will be completely different. You know, how do you celebrate your religious celebrations, Christmas and your Easter and Hanukkah if you're Jewish and all that kind of stuff, and the Muslim and Sikh religious stuff as well, all has a massive bearing on that modeling process that you go through as a child. And then just going beyond that, from 7 to sort of 12 and onwards, then becomes your experiences. Then you experience actual stuff, and then that has an effect as well, a different kind of effect, of course, as well. So, Joy, just going back again for a second, because of this voice thing I was talking about, wasn't it? So the voice thing comes between 4 and 7, and you'll see children, if you watch children playing, they'll talk to themselves about what they're doing, and they'll be moving bits and pieces around and saying, oh, this person's going to come and attack this person, or this person's passing tea. Would you like some tea? And all that kind of stuff. And then sort of from 7 age onwards, that voice starts to become internalized as they start looking around the world and they realize that nobody else is talking to themselves. And they realize that they start to bring that voice inside themselves. So that's where that internal voice that I was talking about earlier starts to develop from that age onwards. And you'll see children, again, if you watch them, they'll still mouth the words as they're playing, but they'll stop actually saying the words out loud. And then eventually they stop moving their lips, and that voice becomes an internal voice. And obviously some people, apparently, they don't have that internal voice, or they don't recognize the internal voice as well. I suspect that probably they have got it because they are making decisions about life and so forth. It's just that they don't recognize it as an inner voice thing. It just becomes a decision-making process that they go through.
Absolutely. So really, up until, every year of our life is important, isn't it? We are shaping ourselves, we've been shaped by the society, family, friends, school, everything, the system, basically, that we need to fit in.
Yeah.
But it's up to us when we realize where we got programmed as little children, how we try to resolve some issues that this can cause us. So
right.
What would you say that people can actually do when they realize that there was a problem when I was a child? I have a bad memory of some situation, and it's really affecting the way I live. So what can they do about it?
Well, our brains, they've proved it recently that our brains are the concept of obviously neuroscience as a whole thing, and neuroplasticity in specifics is how flexible your brain is to being able to relearn and rewire itself to learn new things. And you'll know this from people who've lost, they're right-handed, for example, and they lost their right arm, so they have to learn how to write with their left hand and do everything with their left hands, for example. And so they're completely capable. The brain is completely capable of rewiring itself to learn new skills later on in life. You can learn a new language, for example. It just tends to become harder the older we become, because those habits and routines and those things we got used to, or beliefs that we've got used to, have been hardwired for so long. There's a thing called long-term potentiation, which is a very technical term, but it's basically the amount of times you have a thought creates a more solid structure in your brain, and it sort of calcifies the links between your neurons in your brain. And so the more times you think about something, or the more times you perform an action, the easier it is for those neurons to fire together. And that's how you get this muscle memory thing. So when you start to like drive a car, for example, at the beginning, like it's overwhelming because there's loads of things to do. But after a few years of practice, you start doing things without even realizing it. I've shown you the cube. The cube, here you go.
See, I wanted to talk about that. So yes,
I was going to say, I can solve this cube in about 60 seconds now. And quite a lot of times when I'll do it, and I'll do it in a minute and I'll show you, that I can do this without even really looking at the cube, because it's so muscle memory in my mind that I just don't even really, I just know what to do without even really looking at it. We'll come back to that in a minute. What was I talking about? I was saying I've forgotten where I was going now with that.
the neurons and how it wires quite quickly.
So how we can break those things. You were looking for how to break them. So the first thing is to be aware that you've got a pattern or some kind of thing that's causing you problems, like you were saying, that somebody's recognized that there's something from the children. I personally not a huge fan of looking back at the past and unpicking things that happened in the past. I'd much rather look from where you are now and move forward, because there's nothing you can do about the past. You can't undo what's happened in the past. But what you can do is redo things going forward and change your future. So I always talk about how we tend to get depressed. Remember, I was talking about how we connect this together, because we look at our past and we go, I wish I hadn't done things in a certain way, or wish things hadn't happened in a certain way in our past. And then we kind of drag those things from the past and push them forward into our future and say, I don't want that stuff to happen again. I'm going to be scared to not do that again. And that'll come in the cube again in a second as well. And so that's where the anxiety comes from. You get anxious about something that might happen in the future. So imagine the dog thing. I'm scared of dogs. Or take my example, if you like. I got scared of talking to women. So then I got anxious of talking to women in the future. So every time I went into a bar, I was like, I don't want to go in there. And I got to such a point where I wouldn't even go out, because I thought, I'm just going to get upset if I do. So I'm going to avoid that scenario completely. So you become aware of this thing that's going on, which is obviously what happened to me. And then you start to make choices, and you need to start doing things in a different way. So I always talk about if you want to become ACE, ACE, you have to become aware of the problem to start with. Then you have to make different choices and choose a different path. And then you have to put in effort over time, because you have to reprogram those neurons inside your brain. You have to find a new way, a new path, and then walk the new path on a regular basis, so that the old path grows up with weeds and brambles and all that kind of stuff, so it becomes difficult. I think we've talked about this on one of our walks in the past. I think I used to do like nature wild parks, mindfulness walks in nature in the past. And I would find a field where people have crossed the field to a certain gate on the other side of the field, and you can see that there's a path that people have walked through the grass, and so it's really obvious that they've gone that way. And obviously that's the easy route to go, and if you wanted to try and go a different route and go around the edge of the path or something, it's going to be hard to do that. But if you just did it enough times, you'd eventually wear a new path around the new way, and the old one would grow up, and then that would be the difficult way to go. So the old path would then be difficult, and that's what you need to do inside your brain. You need to build a new path, stop going on the old path, and just change things. So that's kind of the process I go through: is find the thing that you want to change, do things in a different way, and then put effort in over time and recalcify those neurons and find a new path around, and then concrete the new path, so that you always use that.
Yeah, I find real power in knowing this and actually accepting it, because when I figured it out that that is actually something I can do for me, in situations where I feel uncomfortable, not sure, uncertain, whatever feeling I had, but it wasn't right, then I was trying to find the way how I can change that feeling inside me. And exactly as you're saying, finding a new way gives you a new way of thinking, new way of looking at it, and new way of feeling it. So it's brilliant to actually have it explained so detailed as you said it. So,
yeah, exactly. And what we find is that a lot of the times the people will describe, two things here. first of all, people describe themselves, this is the way I've always been, this is the way I'm always going to be. This, you know, and then you just go, no, that's not true. Neuroplasticity proves that you can change if you want to change, but you have to want to change, and that's the difference. And quite a lot of the time, people don't want to change. They've built up this story about themselves. Oh, this is how I am, and it's like, I want to change. There's a classic cartoon you see on the internet sometimes. It's like there's a guy at the front of the stage, and there's a crowd in front of him, and he says, "Who wants to change?" Who wants change? That's right. Who wants change? And everybody's got their hands up. And then underneath it says, "Who wants to change?" And everybody puts their hands down. There's nobody wants to change. They all want change. They just don't want to do the work to actually change. And that can be really frustrating when you find somebody who keeps on saying, "I want to change," but they're not willing to do any work to actually make the changes happen. Or they keep reverting back. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not probably that bad if they don't feel the need to actually do something to change.
Right. Well, there's again another one of those sort of classic stories is the dog that's sitting on the porch whining all the time, and somebody comes along and says, "Why is the dog whining? Oh, he's sitting on a nail." And he said, "Well, why doesn't he move?" He says, "It's not painful enough to move, but it's painful enough to make him whine." And that's that's kind of an example of the same scenario. It's like, well, just get up and move, and then you won't have the pain anymore. Oh, I can't be bothered. It's not that bad, but it's all right. That kind of stuff. And then people don't make the changes. So yeah.
Exactly.
And sometimes, sorry, I was just going to say, sometimes when you do want to look back, it's worth. So I said there was two things earlier on. It's worth looking back sometimes to find out what the problem is, but then to stop looking and stop telling that story. So when I was saying about those stories, this is how my life is, and people will then look for proof that that's how their life is, and they'll go back in their past and they'll say, look, this happened to me, and 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 this proves that this is how it's always going to be. But what you often won't do, because our brains are wired to look for negativity and for danger, is we won't go back and say, well, is there any proof in your past that proves that that's not true? Is there any times when it didn't happen? Again, another one of these is when people say, oh, I never win a competition. A raffle, for example. Somebody does a raffle and somebody wins the raffle and they say, oh my God, I never win. And I go to them, brilliant, you can never say that again. In the future, whenever you're taking a raffle, you can never say, I never win raffles, because you have now won a raffle. So yeah, we tend to forget those examples of things when it didn't happen, because we've told the story. Oh, this happened, negative all the time. We polish the story and we make it, stand out, and our brains just then forget about all the good stuff because we're just not focusing on it, and it just dies away and fades away, and memories just vanish. We all think that we've got really good memories, but actually we've got really terrible memories.
Well, these days with all the distraction, I'm sure it's pretty bad. Yeah.
But the interesting thing, we all have control over those memories. We can choose which memories we're going to remember. I always say the story, your brain remembers the stories you tell. So keep telling the good stories and not the bad stories, because your brain will remember the good stuff then and will forget the old stuff, the bad stuff. So why not do that?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. I think it's interesting how people don't really realize the truth that lies within them. It's just what you tell yourself. That's what you believe in. And obviously, if you tell yourself you're not good enough, you're going to believe you're not good enough. So you might as well think about it and say, yes, I am good enough just the way I am, because this is what you're going to believe in time. It needs time. Everything needs time, especially if we've been programmed so early in life. Then obviously when we become an adult, it's harder to rewire, but it is doable, as you said.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is because we've been wired as children before we had a chance to logically think about anything. We get wired by our parents, our peers, our teachers, and our environment and so forth at a young age. Then when we get older, we kind of just go, but this is just how it is. There is no other way. And because it happened so long, has happened for so long, we feel like there's no other way of doing it. But again, look at other people, look at other scenarios, look at other people who've grown up in different situations and go, well, hang on a minute, this thing that I believe is different to the way they believe. So therefore, how do I know that mine is right? I mean, another one of these is things like, what do you call a bread roll, for example, and different places in England call them different things. Do you put the jam or the cream on top on a scone? Do you call it a scone or a scone? These are all things that you learn as children, and then your family kind of reinforces them over time. And then when somebody else says something different, you go, "That's not right. That can't be possibly true. How can you possibly say that? That's horrifying." and it's just because your brain is so used to the other way that a new way seems so ridiculous. But if you think about it, the other person has got the exact same opposite perspective, and they're thinking that you're crazy because they've learned this other way of doing things. And actually, it turns out you're both right. You just have different perspectives on the world. And the more often that we as a society can recognize different people have different perspectives, the easier it then becomes to have more tolerance and compassion for the rest of the world and the other people in the world, because everybody is completely unique, and everybody has a completely unique look at the world and way of looking at the world. That's a hugely important thing that we can all implement.
I would mention one word that came to me right now, and that's acceptance of each other. That's right. Accepting that everyone is who he is, who she is, and also kind of accepting ourselves, because we are who we are, we can change, of course. But I think it's very important to realize that everyone's got a different story in life, and that there is no right or wrong. It's just how people feel at the time with the knowledge that they have and with the experience they've lived.
Yeah, exactly. And everything that happens to you is happening inside you. There's nothing outside you, because everything that you think, every thought you think, and every experience you have outside in the outside world is actually all just processed inside your brain, and it's just how your brain reacts to it is how you're affected. There's a guy called Sadhguru, I think his name is, online, and he has this really kind of cool thing where he says, to obviously a big crowd in front of him, he says, "I want you to point to me," and they all point at him, and they go, "No. That's not point to where I am." Sorry, is what he says. He says, "No, I'm not there." They go, "What do you mean? I'm not there. I'm not there. I'm there. So if you pointed to your head, that's where I am, because you're seeing an image on your screen through your eyes, but the image on your screen is just projection through the internet from Czech Republic to the UK through the satellites in the space, down to the wires that's coming through the camera here." It's like you're not actually seeing me. You're pointing at me, but I'm not there. I'm actually kind of over there or over there somewhere. I don't know where it is actually physically, but that's just physically where I am. All you're seeing is the image that's projected on the back of your eyes, that's then being converted into electrical signals, that's then being processed by your brain at the back of the head, and that's all that's happening, really. So it's all happening inside your head.
It is 100%. Brilliant. Listen, I would like to tap into anxiety and depression just a little bit before we get into the cube. And I would like to talk about it just briefly. Why do you think people struggle so much these days? We are living in the 21st century. And I know these issues, many people have, even young people, the teenagers. Right. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's probably a couple of reasons for that. I was going to say two, and I thought, well, then I'm forcing myself down a track of two, aren't I? But yeah, there's a few things involved in that. Number one is because of, you talk about why are things getting worse over time. I think there's two reasons for that. Number one is I think we're recognizing it more, so we're aware of it more than we were in the past. But the second thing is because of our interconnectedness, our ability to do what we're doing right now, be connected to somebody else in another foreign country instantaneously like we're doing right now, and also be able to see everybody in the world at any one point. You know what's going on the other side of the world at any time in your life. And so things like Instagram and Facebook, all social medias basically, but also the media as well, the TV and movies and things, allows you as an individual to see so much more of the world than you could possibly than was possible 20, 30 years ago. Because obviously things like YouTube, for example, which we're streaming on right now, didn't even exist, 10, 15 years ago? 15 years ago. Facebook didn't exist 20 years ago. Instagram was what 7 or 8 years ago or something like that. The internet itself didn't exist before 1990. It just didn't exist. I was at university in 88 to 91, and we just had a thing called Janet. We just started to connect up the different universities around the country. So we didn't even have the internet back then, really. In fact, a whole different story on that one, but we'll come back to that another time, maybe, about how my university project. Well, the short answer is I did a university project on linking up computers to generate graphics. And then I met a guy at a conference who was doing the same thing in California. He said, "Why don't you come and work with us?" And I was like, I've just got a job in London. Maybe I'm not just going to do this just yet. And then a couple of years later, that same guy was released Toy Story. So I had an opportunity to be involved in Toy Story, but I turned it down. It's quite a funny story. So it's all that interconnectedness and being able to see other people. And then, of course, what's happening because of that is that we compare. So on social media, we will tend to compare ourselves with other people. So we'll see somebody else doing something and we'll think, oh, look at their life. Isn't their life amazing? Aren't they fabulous? And so forth. Not realizing that person has also put a projection up on their screen. It's only the bits that they want people to see. They're only putting up the images or the events that they want the world to see. They're not putting up all the behind the scenes negativity stuff that's going on in their lives. They're not putting up all their depression. I mean, you think about something like Caroline Flack, for example, and she had all this whole, she committed suicide a year ago or so, and she had this whole sort of facade of fame and glamour and so forth, but inside she was feeling really miserable. And quite a lot of the time you didn't really see that. There was elements and there was things you could recognize from it, but people would look at that and go, oh, I wish my life was like hers. And you go, do you really? Because obviously behind the scenes it wasn't quite so good as she was saying it. But what we all fail to realize is that we're looking at this person, we're looking at their facade and their face, and then we are going onto Facebook and Instagram and so forth, and we're putting on our highlights as well. So we're putting on our best bits. So who's to say the person that we're looking at isn't looking back at our feed and going, I wish my life was like theirs? Because I'm putting up all the good stuff, they're putting up all the good stuff. So we're both looking at a false view of what the other person looks like. And so the phrase I always say is never compare your behind the scenes to other people's highlights reels, because that's dangerous. And you have to recognize that you're putting up a highlights reels, so they may be comparing their behind the scenes to your highlights reels. So we perpetuate this kind of the perfect world thing for people.
Yes. So that's one thing, the comparison and the social media and the online world.
Well, it's the connectivity really, and it's the fact that we have, as a human species, have been evolving for millions of years, and yet the technology that we're using right now has only been around for like less than a generation, really. And so our brains haven't evolved to cope with the speed of technology change at the moment, and that can be very overwhelming for people. And so we haven't got used to this whole thing yet. You can see it changing as people get used to it over time. But it's a tricky one. And a lot of the time we also do the same thing, that comparing thing. We'll look back at our lives and go, look at all this stuff that's happened in my past, and compare that with other people who are saying, oh, my life is brilliant. I mean, you see like gurus and stuff who say, oh, I had this terrible time, but now I'm really famous and now I'm really successful. Then you look at your life and you go, oh, look at my life, it's rubbish in comparison. But you don't see all the work that they put in to get to where they got to. Another classic line is, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. Which is always funny as well, because now they've started using this 9-year-old boy on YouTube who makes like $40 million a year or something opening presents, and you go, well, he's only 9, so it can't take 10 years to be an overnight success. And you go, okay, that's not helpful. Obviously you can be an overnight success, and that's part of the other thing as well. It's because of the global reach of all of us, we have the ability to make a lot of money really quickly, potentially. And that can have a detrimental effect on us as well, because we look at everybody who say, I know the potential is there, but I can't do it, and therefore that's making me feel terrible. I
will jump in here, because that brings a question. Do money really bring us happiness?
Good point. I think
it's important to point that out. So
yeah, no, absolutely. But a lot of people think it does. So a lot of people see money and goods as being the success thing, and it really isn't. There's been studies shown that there is a tipping point. I think it was an American study, so it's like $70,000, I think, in America or something, is the sort of annual income, and at that point, beyond that, it has no effect at all. How much money you have. It's like, so I always say, money is important while you're stressing about being able to pay for the basics. So you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, where you've got food and shelter and stuff right at the bottom of the need, and then you've got self-enlightenment stuff at the top here. If you can pay for and afford all this, live, to be able to live and stay warm and be able to eat and stuff, if you can pay for all that stuff, then on top of that, the money is not really the key thing. But below that, the money does become very important. And so I always say, well, if your money is greater than your bills, then happiness is more important than money. But sometimes when your money is less than your bills, that can be the cause of a lot of stress and anxiety for a lot of people. So it's worth working on that and recognizing that, because I think similar sort of thing, a lot of people will say money doesn't buy you happiness, and you go, that's easy for you to say when you've got money. If you're really struggling to pay your bills, then that statement makes you feel bad, because you're going, oh, I shouldn't be worrying about money, I shouldn't be worrying about paying the bills, and then that creates more problems and down the line. So there's a tipping point.
It's again the wiring, isn't it? It's just what you tell yourself, that's what you believe in. So if you keep thinking about, I haven't got enough, or I have just about enough, then you're going to obviously stay in that zone, because it's getting stronger to believe in that.
And a lot of those money things come from your childhood. Coming back to the original topic, there is like, did your family struggle with money? Do your mum and dad arguing about money all the time? Was it when you asked for things, did your parents say, well, we can't afford that? When you wanted to do hobbies and things, they say, oh, well, we can't do that? Or if you tried a few hobbies and mum and dad have paid for the first one and then maybe paid for the second one, and you haven't stuck at it, and then by the time it comes to the third one, they're saying, well, you never stick at anything. So then you get in your head, I never stick at anything kind of rule gets built into your mind. And then you drag that forward in your life. And then you think you're not good at anything, even though maybe the third one was like playing the piano. And then you become a really famous concert pianist or something. But your parents never supported you because you didn't like playing the violin and you didn't like playing the saxophone. But the piano was the thing, but you just never got a chance to play the piano. So that money stuff then has a problem later on in life as well.
Yeah, it's because we are learning, like when we are children, we are learning from what we see around.
Right. So that's the modeling.
Exactly. So if we hear the same thing over and over again, like that's too expensive, we can't afford it, then obviously it's going to be strongly wired inside us that we go into life with this belief. And then it's really hard to work on that, isn't it?
And you get the classic sort of money doesn't grow on trees, and money is the root of all evil, all these things, and look after the pennies and the pounds will take care of themselves and all this kind of stuff. And it's all sort of a saving mentality. And of course, a lot of that comes from our parents who were in the war in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and so forth, where there was a lot of problems, and you had to be, there wasn't much food knocking about and all this kind of stuff, and it was a bad time. And then they have that mentality. So then when you're in the sort of 70s where food is no longer an issue, it becomes, eat all the food on your plate. Well, here's loads of food. And then you get fat people because, that's another one of those dodgy topics, isn't it? But, if your parents have come with eat everything on your plate thing, and then you come to an all you can eat buffet restaurant, and you've got this mindset of, I must eat everything on my plate, and now I've got unlimited food available to me. This is not a good situation to become in. So those things pull through. They become generational because you learn from your parents, you model your parents, and your teachers and stuff as well. And then when it comes to your children, they then model you. And it's like, well, what beliefs have you got? So that's why you can, as a parent, break that cycle and choose to do things differently. But the only way you can do that is become ace. You have to become aware, you have to make different choices, and then you have to make effort over time to make the changes stick.
Very true. Easy, right? Easy once you figure that out. And
it's a three-step process. It's very simple.
Exactly. Harder to do, but easy to teach and sort of like guide people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's a matter of wanting to, and and then doing the effort as well. That's why I have these charts that I give to my students figure, which is it's a really bad example of one. Is a better example. Where you start at the beginning and you say yes, I'll keep going, and then eventually at the end you try to maintain the positivity towards the end of the chart. And you say yes, I've kept up, so I've done the thing more often than I haven't done the thing, and so I've wired my brains in a particular route and direction that I wanted to go in, and I've kept on track of it as well. So yeah,
I think there is beauty in it that we all can do it. We all can try how we've been thinking and what we've been saying to ourselves, but people are just too lazy or too busy and occupied to actually focus on it, and then all they do is complain actually about how miserable their life is, how stressed they are, but they feed it. Every time we talk about it, we feed it, we believe in it, we say it, we hear it, we feel it, we become it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and the more often you repeat it and you tell stories to back it up and you look for evidence to prove that it's right, the worse it becomes, because you're constantly looking, oh yeah, I am this type of person, this always happens to me, I never win a raffle. I can think of all the raffles I've been to where I didn't win one, but I forget about all the ones when I did win the raffle because I don't want to believe that, because that's not the story I've got in my head. My story in my head is I don't win raffles, and so you believe that thing, and then it becomes your personality. But you can choose it differently. You can choose a different path. You can choose to go through the grass and then build a new road in your garden, in your mind.
Yeah, very true, very true. Brilliant. Listen, John, I think it's time to have a look at your cube. Show us.
Yeah,
Show us. Tell me more about it. Who it's for?
Right.
Why
So
did you create it?
Yeah, right. So this is a couple of things about this. When I was doing my whole process and I was learning about the brain and the mindset and so forth, and I was reading hundreds and hundreds of self-development books, I found a common theme all the way through, and the same things kept coming up. So different books would focus on different things. And I made a list. Actually, I've got an original version of this list, which I wrote in 2014. There you go. The original 15. It's actually 14. So it's 14 surefire ways to improve your mood every day is what the original one was. And 15 was eat healthy food, which I didn't have on there because I always did that. And then somebody else pointed out to me, what about food? And I was like, oh yeah, there are people who don't eat healthy food. I'd forgotten about that one. So I did that and made those things out. And then I started like doing networking events. And I would take a Rubik's Cube with me, like a regular one like this. And I would say to people, I'll do it with this one because it makes more sense then. We all, and we talked about this before. So we all start off as children, that 0 to 3 age group, and we're all nice and neat. We're all nice and neat and tidy, just like this Rubik's Cube. Our brains are sort of unformed. We've got no judgments. We've got no rules. We've got no beliefs in our system. And then we have all those things you talked about earlier on, where we learn that money is the root of all evil, and we should eat all the food in our plate, and we shouldn't talk to strangers, and all these rules that come out of our minds that our parents will teach us and so forth. And we get to this sort of stage where our kind of life is all kind of messed up like this a little bit, and then we look at it and we go, oh, I need to fix some stuff. And then you start sort of trying to change things, and then you realize actually it's not getting any better, and you start worrying about it. So then you can look at your life in this mess and you can go, I can get depressed because I shouldn't have messed it all up in the first place. And now every time I make a change, it just seems to make things worse. So I'm not going to change. I'm just going to sit on my nail and not make any changes. I'm going to live. This is how my life is always going to be. But if you know what you're doing, I hope I haven't messed this up completely. You can come to somebody like me who understands how these things work, and I can help you understand how to put all these things back together again and sort out the Rubik's Cube back to the way it should be, back to the way your life should be. So I was doing that with a regular Rubik's Cube. And then somebody said to me, you're giving out the regular Rubik's Cube and a flyer. Why don't you put the flyer onto the Rubik's Cube? And so that's where the Rubik's Cube came from. And then of course I then had to create some sorry, it's funny lining it up. Then I had to create some I had to go and create some icons this way around. So the line that sort of like indicate the things that I'm doing. So this is, we start from the top here. So we talked about inner voice. That's the voice inside your head. Learn about breathing, because breathing is really important in understanding how you can reduce anxiety. I'll do a breathing exercise actually just before we finish off here. I do it every morning on my lives. I do a daily live on Facebook at the moment, copied onto my YouTube channel as well. And then gratitude. I have a whole process for that. It's called Create Happy. Getting out into nature. That was the natural mindfulness walks we used to do. Moving, same thing. That's exercise, but also could be walking. Good food. Remember that? I mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Shielding yourself against negativity. So this is the stories you tell yourself while you're watching the news, all that kind of stuff. What's this? Routines, making sure you've got good routines, because routines reduce stress. Because the more you know what's happening in your life and how it's happening, the easier it is to be less stressed about unexpected things. Gain control of your money. We talked about that earlier on. So that you don't have the stress of not being able to pay the bills. I've done these the wrong way around, but it doesn't matter. Quiet mind, that's more mindfulness and meditation thing going on there. Learning, what are you feeding? What books are you reading? Are you reading magazines? Are you watching TV? What are you feeding your mind with? It's like the good food, but what are you actually feeding your mind? And then the last one down there is habits. So what habits have you got that are not helpful to you? It's slightly different from routines, because habits are more like sort of daily things that you kind of do without even realizing you're doing them. And then I have a new version of the bottom coming soon on the next version, which also includes sleep. Sleep is not really one of them, because sleep is a byproduct of all the rest of them. Good sleep, but people kept asking me about sleep, so I stuck it on the cube anyway. It's kind of a byproduct of the other ones. So that's why I use the cube as a tool to help people understand the 15 steps, the 15 pillars, 15pillars.com, by the way, or thefreedomcube.com. They both end up in the same place ultimately, I think. But yeah, so that's how it works. And then obviously those steps then become part of my program that I teach people and show people how to improve their lives and feel better every day by using those things and incorporating them into your daily routines, daily habits. So it's just adjusting. So when you talked earlier about people don't have the time to do it, well, these are all things that you can just incorporate into things that you're already doing and just adjust them and do them in a slightly different way. So for example, I have this Create Happy process, which I created. Here it is. Yes, I do have it. Couldn't remember where I put it. So it's a PDF that I can give out to people. It's going to be a paid for thing eventually. And basically this is a little process. So I'll run through that just now, which helps with that neuroscience and the reprogramming of your brain. So the idea is, we've talked about this already, which is we have a tendency to look at negativity. So when we go to bed at night, we have a tendency to look over our day and go, oh, all the bad things that happened during the day. And then we try and go to sleep with all this sort of bad churn going on inside our heads and all the things that we need to do tomorrow. Oh, it's just terrible, and then we wake up the next morning and we think, oh God, I've got all these things to do. And oh, remember yesterday when all those things went wrong? It's like, oh, terrible. And then you start your day off negatively as well. So this whole process, the whole design behind this process is when you go to bed, you write down, it doesn't have to be 3, but I use 3 as a sort of a guide really. 3 things that have made you smile during the day. So just think back and over your day and go, what 3 things have made me smile today? What 3 things have I achieved today? And it could even just be, I got out of bed, I had a shower, I made myself a cup of tea. It could be as simple as that, or I went for a walk. Really simple stuff it can be. And then what 3 things do I want to achieve tomorrow? And I would always suggest make them really achievable, because then you can prove to yourself that you can achieve these things and actually make a difference. Because you don't want to put too big a thing on there, because if you don't do it, then you feel bad that you haven't done it. So make sure there are things you can do. And then 3 things you're grateful for. And again, they can be simple as, I've got eyes I can see with, I've got ears I can hear with, I've got a mouth that I can taste with, for example. I've got legs that I can walk on. I've got a house above my head. I've got a bed I can sleep in. I've got food in my cupboards. All these things, you can find hundreds of these things if you want to find them, but just recognize them all. Then once you've written those things down, then go back through them again and sort of reimagine them and just reinforce those thoughts in your head. So you're thinking about the 3 things that made you smile, the 3 things that you achieved during the day, the 3 things that you're grateful for in the world, and then the 3 things you're going to do tomorrow. So you can kind of pre-imagine, you can project yourself forward to going to bed tomorrow night, having achieved those 3 things. Then the next morning, the same thing. Pick up the list, read through it again and go, oh yeah, I remember all those 3 things I did well yesterday. I remember those 3 things I achieved. I remember the 3 things that made me smile. Those are all really good. Yeah, good. So you start your day off positively. And then you've got a list of the 3 things you want to achieve today. Go and do those 3 things. And then when you go to bed in the evening after, you got, great, I did those 3 things. I achieved those 3 things. I found 3 things that made me smile. And then you start looking at all the good stuff in your life instead of all the negative stuff in life. And that can really help you drag you out of that depression and anxiety and into a positive future. That's what that whole process is designed to do. Plus, added bonus, I found this one out recently. Somebody said to me, where does self-confidence come from? And I thought, this is kind of interesting. And they said, what's in the word confidence? And the first part of it is confide. And what does confide mean? It's trust, right? You trust somebody. And so I quite like the idea of the fact that self-confidence comes from trusting yourself to do the things you say you're going to do. So as soon as you start writing down, I'm going to do these 3 things, 3 achievable things that you can actually do. And then the next day you prove to yourself that you can do them. Every time you do one of those things that you said you're going to do, you then generate a little bit of self-confidence inside yourself. You help to build that self-confidence. You go, well, I said I was going to do that thing, and I did it, which is why they need to be things that you think you can achieve. Those small steps, baby steps to get you going in the right direction. So there you go.
Very true, and it's beautiful, and it's very true. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Is this the normal one? Yeah, the cube. Is it the normal?
This is a normal cube, yeah, which it works exactly the same way. It's just that this one's slightly harder because the orange side isn't very orange, which is why the new version is much more orange. You can see the difference between the 2. Oops. This is more this is not as orange as this one. So yeah, anyway, because I realized that we're getting close to our hour already.
I said mess it up, and we want to see how you quickly do it.
I said I would show you how to solve a Rubik's Cube. I do have a course on how to solve the Rubik's Cube, by the way. So if anybody's got one of these at home and it's all messed up and you want to know how to do it, I have a course on how to do that. And you don't have to learn how to solve the Rubik's Cube. It's literally paint by numbers. Somebody described it as paint by numbers, or as I called it, like make your own adventure thing. So it literally says, find the white side square, rotate it around to the middle like that, and then pop it up to the top like that. That's basically, it's as simple as that. And that goes through the whole cube all the way through like that. And then eventually you'll be able to solve it as fast as I solve it. And it's always a little bit harder. When I'm doing it, talking to people, I must remember to put it in front of the camera, mustn't I? Cross on the top. There you go. It's always a little bit slower than I think it's going to be when I'm talking people through it. Because
you just do it. It's fascinating when you do it. I know I watched when we met, and it was just.
Well, you should learn how to do it. You should learn how to do it yourself. And you'll notice as well. Yeah. We were talking about muscle memory before. You'll notice that I'm not looking at the cube a lot of the time. So there you go. That's the first side done. All the colours around the edges there. And then we got to start looking at the second layer we're going to do now. So again, I just look at it briefly, and then I can look back at the camera and look at you and not look at the cube. Because again, it's muscle memory. I know what's going to happen. I know, once I know a certain piece is in a certain place, I don't have to worry about what I'm doing. So it's like that driving of a car we were talking about earlier on. So the second layer is nearly done now. There you go. There's the second layer all done. And then we've got to do the bottom layer. Then we've got to do the bottom layer. Slightly awkward, this one. It's one of those. Sometimes you find in this bottom thing that it's slightly awkward. But we did get one corner by accident, so that's good. So we've got the cross on the bottom, and then we've got the colours lined up around the outside. We've got one corner done. So now we just need to do this corner down here. So this is the thing. So there you go. We've got 2 corners done now, and then you've got to do these last 2 here. So yeah, and then we just do the last little bit, which is like that, and then we're done. So that's how easy it is. Once you've done it thousands of times, that's how easy it becomes.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would want to put the thousands of times in it.
No, but if you use my course, having never solved a Rubik's Cube in the past ever, and you have a messed up Rubik's Cube in your hand, less than an hour, it'll be solved. Guaranteed.
Okay. Brilliant. Where can people find the course?
Well, if you go to thefreedomcube.com, there's a link on there to the Rubik's Cube course as well. So,
brilliant.
Very good.
Brilliant. Perfect. John, listen, we are coming to an end, but I have a last question for you. The very last one. And that's, we all have some issues that we carry from our childhood up until now. And for people that are watching, for people that are ready to actually change their life, what would you suggest to them as step number one to actually get moving into a better, happier life?
Okay, this is actually something that I didn't touch on so much with the cube earlier on, which was that all of these things are good, but each person is different. Everybody's unique, and everybody's background is unique. So, not what works for one person doesn't always work for somebody else. And I find it's a balance. So I always talk about how it's kind of like a we have these up and downs in our days, and if we find ourselves going down too far, what we really need is we need something that's going to hold us up and prop us up. And those 15 pillars can prop us up. And you can pick whichever ones make sense. So you could use these two, or you could use these two, or you could use these three, and they'll prop up your beliefs, your positivity. And so you can choose whichever one makes the most sense to you. But having said that, without a doubt, the first thing is that create happy process, that writing down things before you go to bed and then looking at them again the next morning, because that's wiring your brain for positivity. But if you've got something specific, every individual is different. And so it comes back to what I said before, which is be aware of the thing that you've got the problem with, make an effort to make some changes and choose a different path through the grass, like we talked about before, and then actually keep walking through the grass on a positive way, and stop telling yourself the negative stories. Find new stories. Look for evidence that proves the opposite of the story you've told yourself in your past. Find out, and if you haven't got it in your past, you can't find it in your past. Look at other people who have proved the same story. So other people who have achieved the thing that you want to achieve, and say, well, if they've done it, that means it must be possible. So therefore, the story that I've got isn't necessarily true, and I can change it because neuroplasticity tells me that I can change it. So does that answer the question? I feel like I rambled a little bit there.
Brilliant. No, absolutely brilliant. It does make sense. So for people that are ready, go ahead and put it into practice, because otherwise nothing will change. I think that's the key. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared. It's been an eye-opening, I'm gonna say, because for many people it's really something new, Not everyone is aware of it, that they have such power within themselves. But once people really get it, that's when change can take place and move them forward.
Yeah, I mean, I always say to people, you have the power to take back the power. So take back the power, choose the power and take it back. And in fact, actually, another thing I always tell people, which I forgot to mention before, was the power of your words as well. Watch the words that you use. And in particular, the one I often say to people is the word should. I should be doing something. And I always say to people, change that word should to choose to. Remember, the C of ACE is choosing. Yeah. So if you're saying to yourself, oh, I really should be doing this, where's that should coming from? Stop shoulding all over yourself. That should is probably coming from the programming you had from your parents, from your teachers, your thing and so forth. You have the ability to choose, become aware of it, choose, and then put effort in to choose a different path in the future. So change that should to can, choose to, or can't, it's like, I should be doing this, but I'm choosing to do this, or I'm choosing not to do this as well. Either way, it's your choice. It's your power. Take control, take power. Take back the power.
Take back the power. Brilliant. Absolutely. I think that's an amazing way of ending it. So thank you once more.
I was going to say, or as my cube says, find your fire. Find your fire. Right in the middle there. Find your fire.
Everyone's got it. Everyone definitely has got it within themselves. It's just a matter of time when they're going to find it and use it. So brilliant. Thank you. It was absolutely amazing. And for everyone that was watching, leave us some comments. How are you feeling? Have you realized actually that you've been programmed, and have you realized what you can do about it? Because I think that's the key. And have you actually heard what we've been saying? Do you understand, or you don't and you disagree? Leave us some comments below. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and next week I'm going to look forward to seeing you all with my next guest. So thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.